Once you start to do the brain work, this sounds really corny, but I'm just going to say it. That's when you start to connect with the real you. Because you thought you were really anxious. And then you're like, wait, I haven't had anxiety in a week. I thought I was an anxious person. Or you thought you were really bossy. And then you're like, wait, I've been super flexible and going with the flow with everything, right? Or you thought you were so lazy and now you have all this energy and you're able to figure things out and not procrastinate for a month, right? And so I think that's the biggest thing. And that's one of I think maybe even the scariest pieces of the program, that some people are like, wait, that's not who I am. So then who am I? And that brings up a whole other side of it, right? And that's where our emotional work comes in the program as well.
Welcome to the Dean's List, engaging conversations at the intersection of entrepreneurship, artistic expression, and holistic health. Experience wellness in full color, where fashion, beauty, and art blend with body, mind, and soul. Embark on a journey that dresses your aspirations in style, paints your life with beauty, and sculpts your well-being in every dimension. This is the Dean's List, where inspiration is always in session. Welcome to the Dean's List, where we stir up conversations on the cutting edge of wellness, business, and brain science. I'm your host, Allison Dean, and today we're diving into the mind-bending world of brain reorganization with Paloma García and Dani Perrecone, the visionary co-founders of In the Cortex. These brain coaches are shaking things up by helping us reboot our brains with techniques that go back to our roots, literally. By revisiting the movements we missed as babies, they're proving that it's never too late to get your brain back on track. Join us as we unpack how Paloma and Dani are reprogramming our brains for peak performance and unlocking new pathways to success, which we all want. Hello, Paloma and Dani. Welcome.
Thank you.
That was a mouthful. All right. Let's just start with your individual journeys that led you to In the Cortex, you both coming together. I want to kind of just understand the personal experiences that inspired your focus on brain health. And if there were any pivotal moments in that experience threshold that made you realize this was your true calling. I'd love to know what that looks like too.
Oh, yeah. It's a very good question. For me, it started in a very interesting way, but very personal, because my brother is a guy who is now 31 years old, and he's a little younger than I am. And he's a kid who always had so many challenges in school, socially, motorly, right? Like, he was just so uncoordinated. Riding a bike was really hard for him, making friends, memorizing his times tables, like all the things that kids are expected to do. We can talk about that whole thing later, but he just was always having challenges, right, in his life. And so my mom was that mom who was always taking him to all the different therapies. He was always somewhere with my mom and this new thing and this new program, this new therapy all over the world, and they just wouldn't work. And so one wonderful Christmas, we were in San Diego. That's where my mom's from. And he was about 17, I want to say. And so she reconnected with a friend from a long time before. And she kind of talked about us and, my kids, blah, blah. And she said, Emilio's having a few difficulties in school and socially. And she said, oh, bring him to me. So we went to the center in Encinitas, and she had us do these weird movements, both of us, and we were dragging ourselves on the floor and we were crawling like cats and dogs. And then she told us so many things about our brains, and we were like, whoa. So my mom took it really seriously, and she put Emilio, my brother, on the program. Long story short, he did it for only 6 months. It was called Brain Reorganization. And now he is a fully grown adult who is the adultiest adult I've ever met. He lives alone in Australia. He has his own company. He has a podcast. He has a boyfriend. He has more friends than anybody that I know. Like, he's just so sociable. He's the guy that'll like go sit at a bar and make 7 friends, where before it was hard for him to even have a conversation with anybody, even
Wow.
if it was us, And so I saw that shift in him and I was like, whoa, this is really cool. So I started kind of digging into a little bit more. I went to school for business, so nothing to do with that. I also got kicked out of school, so that was also my brain. But I ended up starting a business, like a health food business in Mexico City. That's where I'm from. And I closed it. I started learning about this stuff so much, and I reconnected with Dani, who I met at that first center, and she was like, I have my own center. It's in my garage. Let's take this to the world. And I was like, absolutely. So I closed my business, dropped everything, moved to San Diego to be her intern. And along the way, I ended up working at these special needs schools. So I started to learn about autism and the brain. And, we kind of took a bit of a detour, but then we ended up restarting back together with a new name, In the Cortex, in 2020. And we decided to take it all online because of the pandemic.
Okay. And now for Dani, how did it all unfold for you?
So I also have a brother he's older, and he was very challenged growing up too. It's just like everything being labeled with learning disabilities. And my mom was also like Paloma's mom, just seeking constant just help. Like, he was just struggling and working way harder than he needed to. And I just got used to being the kid that was more like the golden child, and I could get away with a whole lot more. I was really good at compensating until I wasn't. When I moved away to school when I was 18, I was a Division I athlete playing field hockey at a school in Ohio. I grew up in San Diego. That's when my world came crashing down. That's when I really was like, oh my gosh, life is so hard. So I was playing a sport, and I really had that athletic mindset that I was, I was the Danimal in college. So everyone just expected me just to be kind of a maniac on the field. I was really good, but I was really, really aggressive. Like, it was like the minute I got onto the playing field, it was like, I will go until it was like the Romans, like, throwing them into the, what do they call that? I keep on referencing the Romans, but back in the day, back when they would have like the fighting, whatever, like that's how it felt to me, right? Like a battlefield. But then I would step off the field, and it was like I snapped back to reality, and it was like, wow, she's really insane. So, but then everything in my life was just so hard, and it really hit me when I got to college because I didn't have my parents to help me compensate anymore. Mm-hmm. And college is obviously way harder than high school, and I had a lot of demands on my plate. So that's when I really felt the heat of my brain and where I was and what was expected of me. It just was not lining up. So then I've always been the seeker. Like, I've always wanted to know and learn more. So after I graduated college, I was like, I'm still not sure what I want to do with my life, because I never understood people who were like, oh, this is what I want to do with my life. That was never me. So then I moved to another country, learned Spanish. I ended up meeting my now ex-husband, but met him there. And then I came back, and I was still like trying to figure out what I'm doing with my life. And like Paloma, I got into ABA work, and I was like, this is absolutely not for me, which is working with kids with autism. And I was like, I want to help, but this doesn't feel like it's the route. And then I met the woman that Paloma was just referencing, and that was 3 years prior to Paloma meeting. Or no, it was probably roughly around the same time. But she just ended up having a spot for me. And she's like, I love when the stars align, because there's literally never a spot for you to come and work. And so I ended up working there and learned everything. I was a sponge, and I was like, give me more. I need to learn this. And I was like, this is me. I'm a disorganized brain. I am a hot mess. Like, I would fly off the handle over the silliest little things. Road rage, you name it, I had it. Like, everything was a competition. You just asked if I wanted a salad for lunch. Did you just call me fat? Like, it was just every little thing was just totally distorted. And then once I learned that it was just how my brain was wired, I was like, oh my gosh, these years of struggle wasn't because I'm dumb, wasn't because something's wrong with me. It just means my brain wasn't organized. And I was like, that was the moment I knew. I was like, this is what I'm doing for the rest of my life. And I remember my mom even questioning me. She's like, are you sure? And I was like, yes, I am. And I remember converting my 1-car garage at the time and my condo. I was like, if you build it, they will come moment. And I remember just getting clients, like people found me, and I was like, this is obviously a need in the world where people are obviously feeling the same as me. I had so much anxiety, and I cannot imagine my life today, 15 years later, not having this work, because now I'm a mom. I have 2 kids, 8 and 5. And the mom that I am today is never what would have been in my like stars if I didn't do brain reorganization.
Right.
I was totally the hot mess mom that was like, before I committed to doing daily brain work, I was yelling at my kids, and I was the mom that was just like, come on, everybody. And it was just chaotic. And I remember telling Paloma how hard it is. And she's like, stop talking about how hard it is. I was like, you don't understand. And like, I was in the total, like, what every mom says, like, my kids are triggering me. I don't know how to work through this. And after I started regulating my brain and doing my brain work, we call it brain work or regulating your nervous system. We'll get into that. Then all of a sudden I was able to start. The best part was when I could see my 5-year-old daughter reflect feelings that I had when I was 5. And then I could then be the adult of what I needed when I was 5. And when I was able to feel that, I was like, oh my gosh, now I need to take this to every parent in the world, that like, you don't actually have to repeat the same patterns and cycles that were given to you.
Mm-hmm.
So that has been our journey of just all these like turns and twists, and then landing here together and creating this program that now we have members all over the world. And there's people in actual true war zones that are experiencing true survival, but they're doing our program and seeing the difference that it's making in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
So we always say it's so easy a baby can do it, because literally these are movements that babies are wired to do. So we're so grateful to be here. So thanks for having us.
Oh my God, yes. I'm curious, obviously, so Paloma, you just said that you went to school for business. So Dani, was it surprising to you when you had that, like, okay, this is my path now and I'm starting a business? Like, what was that connection for you too? Because I think, when you go to school as a business major, there's probably some inclination or some thoughts like, this is going to be the path you take. You may have your own business, or at least you're going to work in a business, arena. But for you, coming from the sports side of things, did you have that same like hunch where you knew you wanted to start something, you just didn't really know what it was when you were in school? Or was it just like it all came together at the perfect time because of, discovering your passion for this?
Absolutely. I actually started as a business major, and I'm laughing because I remember sitting in like econ class going, oh my gosh, if I actually have to do any of this in my real life, I will hate life. So I switched my major and I was like, what do I love? And I was like, oh, I love anthropology. Oh, I love Latin America. I love Spanish. So then I made those all my major, and I loved school. I loved going to those classes, but all of like my stats classes and all those, I was like, oh my gosh. And ironically, and I tell this to all the high school kids I work with, I'm like, I don't use any of that in my day-to-day business life. So you should really follow your passion.
That's right.
So true.
Good advice. Okay, you talked a little bit about this already, but I want to kind of dig more into, because there's probably people listening that don't really know much about brain organization, reorganization, any of it. So can you both talk a little bit about just like, what is it and how does it differ from other like brain health methods, i.e., I've had Katie Packwood on who does neurofeedback. So just, paint that picture.
Yes. The way that we like to talk about it is as if you're building a house, right? So when you're building a house, the first thing you have to do is have a really solid foundation, and then you build the rest of the house however you want. What happens is if you have a shoddy foundation, it's kind of wobbly, what's going to happen? The door is going to break, the windows are going to break, there's going to be an issue with the ceiling and with the whatever, right? And so what does it all come down to? You can fix all of those things for the rest of your life, or you can say, whoa, I built my house on a really, really wobbly foundation. And that's what happens to a lot of people with their brains, right? So when we're in our mom's tummy, until we're about a year and a half old, sometimes 2 years old, it really depends on the person, we're all meant and wired to do certain movements. So, when you see the little like arms and legs popping out in the belly, right? Or when you see a little baby that's doing tummy time and suddenly they're gliding across the floor, or of course, we've all seen babies crawl. Those movements, along with many others, are actually really crucial for developing the primitive brain. And the primitive brain is crucial for so many of our automatic functions. That means breathing, digesting, balancing, regulating our fight or flight response, our emotional regulation, so many different things, filtering out the stimuli that doesn't matter and focusing on what does matter, right? All these different things that we kind of assume that are totally natural and automatic in the brain, and there's no way that you won't have that, Well, there is a way if you didn't move enough when you were a baby, right? Because it's literally like you just didn't teach your primitive brain how to do its job, but then you grew up and you said, do your job. And the primitive brain's like, wait, what? I don't know what you're talking about. How do I do that? And so that's the challenge comes when the primitive brain is underdeveloped, but you still have to do those things, right? You have to breathe, you have to digest, you have to regulate your nervous system in some way. And so what happens is that the logical brain, which is where we have our higher functions, right? We have learning and language and all of our higher thinking. That part of the brain has to start to compensate for all the jobs that the primitive brain can't do. And ultimately, we're left with less bandwidth for our day-to-day life. And so we're left with less space to respond, and our primitive brain takes over and we start to react. And that's where we can have some challenges with anxiety, with procrastination, with emotional regulation difficulties, even symptoms that are usually, ADHD, like having trouble sitting still or having trouble focusing or filtering that incoming stimuli, right? A lot of that just means that the foundation for your brain is not very solid. But what's cool about the brain, what we love, and the reason we do all of this is that the brain is plastic. Neuroplasticity has taught us that the brain can rewire itself at any point in our lives, at any age. Scientists used to think it was only, in the first months of life, and then you were stuck with your brain forever. Absolutely not. This is a reality for all of us. And so the cool thing is what we do is we kind of like harness that neuroplasticity and say, okay, all those movements you were meant to be when you were a baby, just do them now. Whether you're 6 years old or you're 60 years old, doesn't matter. You're able to give your brain that solid foundation. And what happens is, that's what we call it brain reorganization, right? Your brain starts to reorganize and you just become so much more efficient in your life. And things just start to become so much easier because you're no longer reacting to the world with a disorganized brain that is just in survival. You're able to process things logically, which is technically the way we are meant to do things in our life.
Danny, were you going to say anything?
I was just going to say my favorite part about all of it is that we ask you to do specific movements.
Right.
And the way you move tells us where that part of the brain was left off. And so in that sense, it's so tangible, it's easy to measure. And so a lot of our participants are like, oh, let me try it. Let me give it a go once they get past like the initial like uncomfortable part of it. Because it is a very raw and vulnerable space to get into for most people.
Yep.
So once you get past that piece and you're like, okay, I'm ready to try it. Everyone always thinks like, how hard can it be? And then they do it. And then they're like, oh, wow, that's actually harder than I thought it was going to be. And it seems like it would be so simple, right? And me approaching it, I was a Division I athlete. I'm like, I can move any way you want me to. I got this. When I got on the floor, I couldn't move across the floor. And that directly connected to why I reacted and responded to the world the way it was. And that was my aha. And so that's why I love it so much, is because every single person can go through all these signs and symptoms of what's going on in their lives, and it will always connect to how you move. So my favorite one too is when people are on their hands and knees and we ask them to crawl. We'll look at how their hands and their feet are moving. And so a really obvious sign that your eyes aren't working with the brain. So this would be like someone who has to figure out ways they often avoid reading because they hate reading. If they go on the floor and their hands are turned out to the sides. And that's always our sign that we're like, oh, you must get really tired when you read, or you probably don't like reading. They're like, how did you know? And I just did like a bunch of assessments with my high school field hockey team. And they're like, Coach, you're like a mind reader. And I was like, no, I'm not reading minds. It's nothing like woo-woo. It's literally like Paloma said, you have specific jobs for a reason when you're a baby, because you're really not doing a whole lot as a baby, right? But you actually are, neurologically speaking. You're doing so much. And what's happening today is we're interfering with that process, and we're putting babies in. And this is, again, we always like to tell parents, this is no shame. You haven't done anything wrong. Our society is geared towards progress and movement and go, 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 that we think that a baby walking at 7 months is a huge, amazing accomplishment. And we see it as like, oh my gosh, no, you just robbed that baby of 4 months of potential brain work, right? And so there's no shame here. And that's where Paloma said you can go back at any age. And that's what's so beautiful about this process is I learned it in my 20s. And here I am close to, hitting 40. And I still do it daily just because we live in a world that's very offensive to a nervous system. It's like very aggressive and we don't have enough rest and digest going on. So anyways, you can go back and you can shift how your brain is processing the world just by doing these movements. And it's really about doing them on repeat until your brain's like, okay, cool, I got it. Now that can lie dormant. And I don't have to interfere with that logical brain anymore. Mm-hmm. And it really is like a clear dissection between your logical and survival brain turning on. And you can see it in people. You can see when the eyes dilate. You can see when their shoulders come up. You can see when their chest starts pumping. You can just see when they're in that space of like, I'm not chill, I'm not relaxed. And we always are like, oh, I'm so uncomfortable around that person. And it's because their nervous system is dysregulated. And so we always tell, and so that's why I love what we do too, because we can give you tips on how to help calm that.
Yeah.
So that way it puts more of like a normalized approach rather than just telling someone, calm down, or you're just overreacting. It's like, no, that's the worst thing to say.
I hate when people tell me that. I literally hate it. And I'm like, ew, did you say that to me? Okay, so how does what you do though? So, because now we have so many choices, right? Like the amount of choice that we have and the amount of things that are coming at us where people are saying this is going to help your brain, or this is going to take this pill and it's going to help you, whatever it is, right? So how do you kind of contend with that stuff? And, also I think it's interesting, are there like hyper complementary things that like work well together? As you were talking before, I was thinking to myself, it would have been, I think, very interesting if I had done your program before I started neurofeedback.
I was just going to say that.
Right? Only because I almost feel like it would have really jump-started everything that much more quickly for the neurofeedback to really do its thing. I mean, obviously, I think it's helpful no matter what. But I think that would have been an interesting, obviously, we can't turn back time. But, in retrospect, if any of y'all out there is about to go, help your brain, maybe do this first. And then...
Start here. Mm-hmm.
And then call Katie Packwood. Anyway, but yeah, I think the question really is just, of all the different modalities that you've seen, I guess what is helpful with what you do and what may be less so, or, perhaps you just haven't seen enough data to prove that it's as helpful as it could be.
What we always say is that we wish that there were like a menu that everybody had for self-care, right? And like self-improvement. And this is the only appetizer. And then you get to choose all the rest of it, right? You get to choose your entrees, your desserts, your whatever, because it's going back to the house, right? Lay the solid foundation and then start building, right? So what we're doing, most of us are doing, is we're building like crazy and we're adding all these extra rooms and we're adding a porch and a pool and this and that, but the foundation is still not there. So it's all kind of falling apart, right? And that's what happened to my brother, for example, where he was doing all these different therapies and all these different modalities, and it wasn't sticking because his nervous system wasn't regulated. And what that just means is being your brain and body being able to understand when to be reactive and when to be calm, right? Yeah. When to be in fight or flight, when to be in rest and digest, and to actually be able to process things for what they are and look at a situation and say, oh, that's not that big of a deal. It's just, the teacher calling my name in class. It's not a life or death situation. When our brain is dysregulated and our nervous system is dysregulated, we're processing day-to-day moments like that as if it were a lion chasing us in the middle of the jungle. And so we have the same physiological reaction, but it's not that, right? And so that's usually what we say is, if you give your brain this, then all the other modalities will be so much more powerful. Because a lot of us have been there where we tried something and we're like, it worked for about a week. Or, oh, it didn't really work for me. I wonder why. And it's just, that's usually why. It's because your nervous system just wasn't prepped for it. And maybe you go to several sessions of something like neurofeedback, and one session you were super regulated and it worked great and it was awesome. And then you went to the next one and you're like, it didn't work. What happened? Well, maybe you had a really stressful day and then you didn't eat enough and then you didn't drink water and then blah, blah, and you didn't sleep well, whatever it is. And that all builds onto how your brain's going to process this one stimulus.
Yeah. Okay, so you just said, because obviously you see so many people submitting things. Obviously, I sent you videos of me doing things. And you telling me things about, hey, you probably need to work on this and this. But like, so even with like how hands are placed on the floor when you're crawling, are there any other just interesting findings like that where, I guess, if someone's head is up versus down, or I don't know, like any things like that where people are like, okay, yeah, so if you just want to do a quick little test right now, as you're listening to this, as you're listening to all of us have this conversation, get on the ground and start crawling around. And if you do 1, 2, 3 of these things, you probably need to take the In the Cortex class ASAP. I don't know, like what would that look like?
Well, we're really hesitant to tell people too much because what we do, and building off of what we said earlier, is like we live in a culture that's just like, I got to get it right and be perfect.
True. Yeah.
And so what happens is that cortex then comes online and starts to trick it and try to do it the right way. And we always say there's no right way. There's just an efficient way to move. And so there's little things like, I give the hands one because that's a really quick one. Like when you go to your hands and knees position, if you look at what your natural placement on your hands was, and there's also like, if you cup your hands, you don't, like if this is the ground and you don't want your hands to actually touch the ground, you would, you have a lot of sensory challenges. Like you don't like tags in your shirt or certain things happening around you. And so that's like, those are tiny little things that we look at that most people would have no awareness of what's happening. But the very first movement we introduced is called creeping. That's when you're on your belly and you're supposed to move from point A to point B in the room. And we only tell you to keep your hands in front of you. So your hands are like in front of you at a 90 degrees. And then we keep your chest down and your belly down and move your body any way you want to get to the other side.
It's so hard.
That initial movement will give us a direct percentage of how much that pons, it's spelled PONS, is actually developed in your brain. And that means how much of that pons is on. And so for most people, so for example, for me, I was about 10% developed in the pons area. So that meant it was really hard for me to move. I laid on my belly and I even knew what the movement was supposed to look like, but I was being really mindful to override and do a natural response to it. And I had a really hard time moving. Like I couldn't coordinate my hands and feet, and it had nothing to do with athleticism, had nothing to do with coordination because I had all of that. It had everything to do with how much that brain got development in certain movements when I was a baby. So for me, it matched. It was like, I am the quick to fly off the handle, super fight or flight mode, more fight than flight, actually. Tons of anxiety. And it just matched my personality. So we always say, send us the videos because we can give you so much about you without telling you too many things that you're doing, because we never ever want you to use your cortex to do the movement. That's really important.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was very delayed in sending you my videos, admittedly. And I was shocked at how difficult it was to creep.
Yeah.
Like I was to the point where I recognized immediately that it should be something that I'm doing more frequently because it was that challenging, right? Because I should probably be doing it more. Okay, so for people at home that want to start doing stuff like this, I feel like unless you have like a dance studio in your house, it's not easy to have like runways for crawling and creeping.
Yes.
So what do you, especially for like a long stretch, right? Because like, I mean, obviously if you want to do it for like, I don't know, like a few beats, that's not that difficult. But especially as an adult, like, for a little kid, I guess it's not so challenging. But like for an adult, what do you recommend? Because I feel like I need tips myself. I'm like, where do I do this in my house, people? Because I'm like looking around going, okay, I guess I can like sweep my floor in the living room a little bit. I guess that could work.
Yeah. Well, we're looking for a good endorsement deal from Swifter that is going to pay us in clothes, so you can like Swift your, like we say, you creep your floors. But obviously that's still a ways out. But you know what? It's kind of like whenever you start a new exercise routine, right? You're kind of like, I don't know how invested I am yet. So I might just like go get some of the gear and like kind of prepare. And then as you build into the practice of whatever, then you start accumulating more of the gear and you get yourself more in tune to it. So I have turned into the person who's like, I will find a designated space for this. So I have all carpet in this upstairs room that I'm in. And I went and bought panel boards that I've taped with just clear packing tape, and I've taped 3 of them together. So I have a good 24 foot creeping space, and it's just for creeping. And so that's kind of where my dedication is taken on. And I feel like some people have created a space similar in their homes, if it's possible. Obviously, not all of us have that privilege to have that space, but most people who have wood, tile, linoleum, or any slick surface, they're going to be fine. You're just going to have to, like, some people tell us they move their whole furniture around, they change the arrangement of their house to make it work.
Okay.
So it's really about you deciding like what level you're ready to commit to, and then it'll start happening. So that's my first thing, is like, we always, and that's a big thing we start tackling in our program, is like, what's your resistance? Like, why do you have so much resistance to change? Because it's scary when someone tells you everything that you've known about yourself is about to shift because it was rooted in how your brain was wired. It kind of takes you a moment to go, what does that look like? Right.
Yes.
And it's like, what was I before? Right. And I, like, for me, it was exciting because I'm like, I'm so ready to ditch the old Dani who was a hot mess. I don't want her around anymore. She was not cool. So new Dani is a lot more fun. And that's my personal opinion. So, but, so that was where, and I was the person who was like eager for change. Right. And so it's a mix of how people approach it. But the best thing is when you first start, just telling yourself, I got to go clean the floor. At least my house is cleaner, right? And then from there, once you start feeling the changes and experiencing it, then you invest more. And you're like, okay, now I want to create a space that's just for this.
Right.
And I've come up with some pretty crazy experiences of like doing a tiny room where I did just the perimeter, but I removed all the furniture from it. We've heard of people taking cardboard outside onto grass. We've heard of people who do it. We've had one video come through where someone's actually creeping on cement. I don't recommend that. The best thing is if you do have a gym membership and just going in, doing it in the basketball, the yoga space. I was coaching the field hockey team. They had a dance room, and we would just go to the dance room and the girls would go across the floor there. But really, and the investment is so low. You need maybe buy some knee pads, or we even show you in our program how to cut the toe off of a sock. And now you have a makeshift knee pad. And then you buy some fleeces, or you have a blanket laying around your house. You put that underneath you. So really, it's not supposed to be that expensive, and you can get really creative with how to get it in every day.
I mean, I do think it's well worth it, like whatever it takes, right? Because I mean,
Exactly.
it's your brain. We want it to function optimally. So
Yes.
We have a group chat. So you can go into the group chat and be like, hey, I'm having a hard time. Can you guys show me pictures of what you're doing? And then people love sharing, right? And so our members will share all the things like, oh, this is what I do. This is what I do. And then I've come across so many times like, I would have never thought of that.
Yeah.
That is genius. Thank you.
Yeah. I feel like you should also post your room though, Dani, too. Like, whatever. I mean, like, or link me to that post because I clearly missed it.
Yes.
Yes.
It's all over our Instagram, but yes, I'll definitely link it. Yeah.
This is where your brain needs help. This is another example. Okay. I should say, is there something that might be surprising from like a misconception standpoint about brain health or brain development, and like how you both have had to navigate some of those narratives?
Well, I think that often a lot of us attribute certain things and behaviors and preferences and et cetera to just, that's my personality, right? That's how I am, right? We're so big about labeling ourselves and labeling things in society. And I talk a lot about society's expectations, okay? But society's expectations are very high, right? Like, you know? And it's kind of like once you start to do the brain work, this sounds really corny, but I'm just going to say it. That's when you start to connect with the real you. And because you thought you were really anxious. And then you're like, wait, I haven't had anxiety in a week. I thought I was an anxious person. Or you thought you were really bossy. And then you're like, wait, I've been super flexible and going with the flow with everything, right? Or you thought you were so lazy and now you have all this energy and you're able to figure things out and not procrastinate for a month, right? And so I think that's the biggest thing. And that's one of the, I think maybe even the scariest pieces of the program, that some people are like, wait, that's not who I am. So then who am I? And that brings up a whole other side of it, right? And that's where our emotional work comes in the program as well. But I think that's the biggest thing for me, at least, that I love, is that people will just tell me, oh, no, I'm so anxious, or like, oh, well, my brain is broken, so I shouldn't even do this. I'm like, if you think your brain is broken, do it, because it's not. It's actually not. We have so many ways of like labeling ourselves into a hole, and it's just not always real.
Exactly that. I think so. Information is great, right? And I think we're in such an information overwhelm state right now. It's almost like too hard to navigate sometimes. And we've seen the pendulum shift from like, there's no resources, there's no support for kids like Emilio and my brother who are just not sure what's going on with them. And now everyone's like, oh, I have ADHD. And everyone's like, oh, I just have autism. And I've been seeing on social media now reveal cakes on what diagnosis you have. And I'm just like, but okay, I love that we have awareness. But then what I find hard is that now we're just stuck in a box. And I'm not saying that they're not real. Very clearly, you definitely are experiencing that. That's real. But what happens when you get the diagnosis is that then sometimes you can't get away from it. And then you can't actually grow into being who you really are supposed to be. And there's so many strengths that come with having a brain that's, because we talk about this on our podcast, there's no such thing as a neurotypical brain anymore. Like, we all have our own quirks. We all have our own things going on. We all have life the way we like it. But there is a difference in being regulated. And there is a difference in being able to handle something for what it is versus distorting it and turning it into something bigger, right? And I was 100% like, I dodged a diagnosis. I would have for sure had so many things going on with me because school was hard for me, but I was able to fake it. And I like think back because I homeschool my son and I'm like, oh my gosh, is that how it worked? Is that what it was? Like, even telling time for me, oh my gosh, on an analog clock, forget it. Like, people would joke about it. And I was like, I can't read it because I created a block from the minute it happened. And from then I could never go back. Right. I have so many people who go, oh, I don't know my right and left. I'm just dyslexic. And I'm like, that's not actually how it works. And I just want people to understand that exactly what Paloma just said is, this isn't who you have to be. If something in life is hard, it just means you're working harder. It doesn't mean you're broken. It doesn't mean anything's wrong with you. And yeah, seeking a diagnosis can be helpful because then it can give you more support and resources and guidance. But just be really careful to not get stuck there because neuroplasticity is so real. We both experience it every single day. We witness it every single day with all of our members. It's 100% possible to shift how your brain is wired. You just need to have a desire to want it, and that's it.
You need to know. I don't know. I immediately, as you were talking just now, my brain went back to like me in school, and I was saying to myself, this should be like a part of all PE classes. Right?
Yes. Yeah.
Like, why isn't this a part of like this should be the way the PE class starts? Is like, okay, before you do the physical, like crazy stuff, even though, I mean, this is kind of physical, I will say. I mean, like creeping stuff, there's no lie. There's like, I feel like you're getting some kind of a workout with that. But I feel like it should be in schools, like all schools, if you have a kid in school. I mean, obviously, any of the homeschool moms can just make their kids do it at home. But yeah.
Well, we have a school program. So we're in a couple of schools throughout the US. It's not super easy to get in because there's a whole machine of like, you have to go to the principal and then the superintendent and then the county and then the this and the that. But when they see it, it is the coolest thing, Allison. You would love it because you will walk into a classroom and to introduce the program, to do like, because we've done some of them in person, right? We're like, and we can see the kids, right? Some of them are crying. Who's pushing the other one? Who's trying to get all the attention? Who's totally dysregulated in the corner, right? Like, what's going on? And then we'll walk in 3 months later, and it is a different classroom. And the kids are learning, and the kids are connecting. Do they still have tantrums? Yes, because they are humans. Do they still have challenges? Yes, because they're still humans, right? Just like all of us. But is it easier for everybody to go to school? Absolutely. And the teachers are like, I love this because I don't have to be putting out fires all day long with the behaviors. I'm able to actually teach, which is what I signed up for, right? In the first place. So that's really the future we're looking forward to, is one where the second you get into school, The second you get into not even like daycare, we do an assessment. What's going on with your primitive brain? Okay, let's get this movement going the second you can. And then everybody's set up for success from the beginning.
Okay. I'm going to we're going to manifest this. This
like 100%. Yes.
I think the data too. So if you're in a couple schools, then you just really need to leverage that data, because I think that's a powerful instrument to use when you're at least trying to, I guess, break down some barriers in some of the more bureaucratic environments that require a bit more information,
Absolutely. That's exactly it.
Okay, well, I love it. I love how it all sounds.
Thank you.
let's talk a little bit about like the birthing of In the Cortex. I want to talk about challenges that were maybe unexpected, or things that were perhaps an obstacle that you overcame. Anything that happened early on that has shaped your approach to what you're doing currently.
I'm laughing because I feel like everything has been a challenge. We have literally learned how to do everything on our own, and we Google everything. How do you do this? And then we have, that's the best part. Had I not done my brain work, I would have been scared to ask people for help, or not wanted to figure out how to do things. And I would have given up so much easier. It's pretty obvious between the two of us. Paloma is more of the tech guru, but I have come so far in my abilities on technology. Sometimes I have to ask her to show me how she just did X, Y, and Z, and she will. But we just keep going. And I think that has been, we have such a will inside of us to share this information that we have figured out every single problem. And then the best part is now when we have something pop up in our program, we're like, yes, something new to learn, to make it better, to make it streamlined, instead of getting frustrated.
Yeah.
And I would say that was a big shift for us, because we also work on, besides the pons and the midbrain, that's the creeping and the crawling, the lower centers of the brain, we also work on the primitive reflexes, which we mentioned, but we also work on the subconscious. And the subconscious beliefs are so important, because like I just mentioned, growing up for me, I used to think I was dumb in school and things came hard for me. So I just created a belief about myself that I'm stupid. And I had to work through that, right? And so we have a process that takes minutes that helps you shift whatever limiting belief you have into something that you want to have instead. And that has been one of our biggest things that have gotten us further along. And I think when someone is starting a new business and they're still putting the ideas together, I kind of look at them, I'm like, I hope you have a real strong desire and passion to bring this to the world, because most people will fizzle out quickly, because it is really hard to keep going, especially when you don't have the results and the money coming in like you thought you would, right? And it does have to be a passion project. So that's number one for us. Having that is what drove everything else. I can't think of what our hardest thing was, though.
I can easily think of what our hardest thing was. When we first went viral on TikTok.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. People were mean. People were very mean.
People were so mean to us. And I mean, you expect it, it's social media, people are mean, blah, 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 whatever. But that's where the imposter syndrome really came out. I remember, and the one video went viral was literally me talking. So it was also very personal to me. I was like, that's my face, bro.
Yeah.
And I remember I went into this warped state where this makes no sense, by the way. Anybody listening, I know this makes no sense, okay? But I, for some reason, thought when I was on, it felt like I was under the microscope. So it felt like everybody in the world was looking at me. So I could walk out on the street and be like, oh my God, everybody's staring at me. Everybody's looking at me right now. And then it also felt like anything that I did on my phone, people could see. I know it makes no sense, but I would literally be scrolling through TikTok on my regular For You page, and I would think, oh my God, those people are watching me. And I was like, dude, what? And so I obviously had to do a lot of brain work and reconnect and get myself out of that funk. But it also put me, both of us, into this crisis where we were like, what's going on? What is this feeling? We know what we're doing. We know it works. Why are we questioning it? Right. And that really, I think, catapulted us to the next level of being there's always going to be somebody that disagrees with you. And the people that disagree with you on social media are always going to be the loudest, right? Yeah. But guess what? That's fine. If you don't want to creep and crawl, don't do it. Okay. If you do, just call us.
Yeah.
If you don't, that's fine. I'm not forcing you to do it,
Right.
That was a big takeaway. And then we might have like clicked on some of the profiles where like these are like teenagers.
Well, then there was this one lady who she was like this big a TikTok psychologist, remember?
Yeah.
And she stitched my video and she said, this woman is a scammer or something like that. And I was like, oh my God. And then I watched her video and I was like, why do you, it's also like, she's hurting. Like maybe she feels a little threatened because I'm saying that the brain can change instead of just taking a pill. I don't know. But that's something that now we can do. And before it was really hard for us. Like any small like negative comment or a stitch like that or something that would be like, oh, okay, well, we're done. Gotta close the business. Okay, bye. See you never, And like now it will literally happen 17 times a day. And I'm like, oh, whatever, bye,
Doesn't matter. Yeah. I mean, I think with stuff like that, and I appreciate you sharing that. I mean, obviously, it shows you the people that probably need to do some brain work,
yes.
Right? Just how many actually are proving your point.
Exactly.
I mean, at the end of the day, data always speaks for itself, right? So,
exactly.
And I think you both have enough testimonials. I mean, you've experienced it with your own brothers, right? So it's like, you know that this stuff is, and with yourselves, you know that this stuff has impact. So, people can't, in my opinion, you can argue data as much as you want, but data is data. So, you just kind of start looking not so smart if the data is there and you're saying that the data isn't there. It's like, no, it's there.
Exactly.
I think it's 100%. There it is. The data's there.
That was it. That was the test of the belief that we really needed to be like, no, we are so confident that this is what the whole world needs to hear about. And it was like, I feel we now know that the universe is like testing us to make sure we're ready for the next level. So that was just a big old test. And now we see it all as just, okay, we're being tested. We're ready to level up. And once we came over that test, then we went viral. And then we realized TikTok wasn't really our audience. And so we and more of our efforts have gone to Instagram anyways. And it's a way different group of people over there. And it just, so
healthy. That was a healthy observation, and you pivoted, so that's great.
Yeah.
Okay, I do want to talk about like some significant transformations that you've seen outside of family members, perhaps, or yourselves. But just any like really memorable success stories of people that have completed your programs that I think would benefit others to hear. So people that have been afflicted by things or have overcome things. I don't know, whatever. I mean, obviously you've, I'm sure, seen the spectrum of successful transformation. So whatever you want to share.
One of my favorite ones is always when, and it's happened multiple times. So it's not just one account, but it's when a pediatrician tells a parent, just prepare, your child's never going to talk. And they go, try doing this, this, and this, right? And then that parent does that and that and that. And then they go, okay, well, kind of saw some things change. And they're at their very last. Like, this is it. This is my Hail Mary. If this doesn't work, I don't know what else to do, right? And then they'll find us. And then they'll do the brain work with their kiddo. And then all of a sudden their kids will start talking. And I no joke, it always is happening when there's like a no pressure situation. And I can remember one mom telling me that her kid was in the back seat. They were driving down the road and he read stop on the stop sign. And she's like, I almost crashed my car because he has never said a word in his life. And now he read it out loud. And so that's happened so many times, so many parents. And even in my son, and my story too, just to let other parents know, my son was born with he had a lip tie and a tongue tie, which if you know about that, there's just a big restriction down to the big toe. And so he had some retained primitive reflexes. And I was a first-time parent, so I was very stressed. And especially because I thought I was going to have a perfect child because everyone told me I was, because I knew about brain work before I had kids. And he had a kickstand crawl. So he crawled with one leg out, like the foot was on the floor instead of the knee, and the other knee was down. And I just remember following him around being like, oh my gosh, buddy, this is so bad for business. Like people aren't going to believe that I know what I'm doing. Like, and I would like force his knee down. And the more I pushed on that, the more he was just kind of like, Mom, I'm here to teach you. And I wasn't getting the lesson yet. But then finally I did some emotional work on me and he brought his knee down. But by then he had already missed his whole crawling window of having like a solid 6 months of crawling. And so he's had some challenges with speech and it's connected to crawling. And so I've had teachers and people in the past tell me like, oh, have you looked into a speech assessment? And I'm like, no, like I do brain reorganization. And they're like, I don't really know what that is. And I'm like, it's going to work itself out. Like, I'm not worried. And I would tell you like a good 2 years ago, you couldn't hear when he said certain words. You'd be like, what did he just say? And today you can't tell that he's got, like, there might be some challenges with saying like an R or something, but I've done no speech training with him.
Yeah.
I've only done myofunctional therapy just to help put his tongue in the place of where it needs to go and really helping on his oral posture. But I haven't done any other speech stuff. And so for him, I've seen his speech get way clearer. I know for me, before I did brain work, I used to eat my words a lot too. And I wouldn't be able to enunciate and it would be really hard to hear what I was saying. And as I did more brain work, it's because I would have so many thoughts in my head and I couldn't keep them without them coming out quickly because I would lose them.
Yeah.
And with brain work, it's helped me hold them and then remember back what I was saying.
Mm-hmm.
So those are like the big testimonials of speech coming online. I mean, there's so many though. Like our chat is having like a woman just posted that she's been on blood pressure meds her whole life and she's been taking active readings her whole life. And now she's doing her brain work and she's like, oh my gosh, I'm coming off my meds. And my blood pressure is where it's supposed to be.
Whoa.
We've had parents that are like, or other members that are moms, and we always tell moms like when they first find our program because they always want to do it with their kids first. And our big approach is that you have to be regulated as a parent before you can bring your kids on board. Some moms have a really hard time hearing that and they're like, no, just help my kid first. We're like, no, we have to get you regulated before you can help them. And so then they start doing the program and they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize how much I needed this. And one of those moms, she was on thyroid meds since she was like really young and she came off. So we see a lot of people come off of meds and we're not ever saying that we're the cure to anything. But when you give the brain what it needs and it starts regulating and the right hormones start coming at the right time, then all of a sudden, maybe you don't need that because the doctor's like, whoa, you're over medicated. We need to get you titrated off of this.
But it all goes hand in hand. We think that maybe the thyroid wouldn't have that much to do with the brain, but of course it does, right? Because it's hormones. I mean, it's all that stuff. I remember one kiddo who, when I used to be an intern with Danny, I think I went to Mexico City for like, I don't know, a couple weeks, maybe like a month and a half. Mm-hmm. And there was this one kid that used to come in. He was really little. He wasn't doing the program. His brother was, or his sister was, a sibling. And this kid was having a lot of developmental delays. You know, he wouldn't eat anything, so he was really skinny, and so the mom was really worried. The only thing he would eat were those little packets of half and half from like Starbucks. Yes. And so she would give him that all day long to try to get him to gain weight, but he wouldn't gain any weight. And so Danny was like, well, why don't we just get him on the floor? Let's just lie him down next to his brother when he's doing the brain work and see what happens. And we started to stimulate some of his reflexes and movements, whatever. I left for Mexico City. I came back a month or whatever later. And we're in a session with that same family. And I'm like, oh, who's this little cutie? I didn't recognize the chubby, healthy, happy, bubbling baby. It was the same baby. I was like, what? She's like, we started doing the brain work. His teeth weren't coming in. His teeth grew. And everything just like exploded. And he was this like, because he used to be really quiet and skinny and we would kind of be like, oh, what's going on with the little baby? He was just like flourishing in every way. And the mom was like, if it weren't for you guys, I don't know what I would have done. Like he would have just been like, I don't even know what would have happened with him. And so that was a really huge one for me. And I really love one of our members who actually shared her experience on one of our podcasts. I don't even think she made a podcast, Danny. That might have been before the podcast. She made a video for us, but she was struggling really, really, really a lot with her mental health. Like a lot, to the level that she was having some very dark, intrusive thoughts. And that's the one thing that like, she's like, I will never forget that that's what went away when I started to do the brain work. I mean, that, and you know, if you've ever dealt with that, you know how hard it can be. And so that's another one that I will never forget. And she's the best. Yeah.
Those are some pretty, I mean, I'd say from a testimonials perspective, seems like all of us should be doing some of this.
Yes.
Have you thought of doing some kind of like a controlled group sort of experiment or something with people that maybe are afflicted with something more like not so maybe in the mind, but like the thyroid issues or the like things in their maybe gut health issues or things like that where like, I just wonder if push all these people to just say, okay, I want you to do the program and just follow them along to see what happens. I mean, holy cow. I wonder what the data would look like.
We cannot wait for that experience. We got really close to getting into a prison. And then,
I was like, wait, that was
like, in like a good way. Like it was like the right group of guys that was like ready to like start doing all their like shifting, and it was like so close, and then it didn't happen. Like that group would be. Here's the tricky part: is like getting people.
Oh, yeah.
We've done this so many times where we have so many people who are like, oh, I'll be your person, your testimonial, and then there's something about like them staying consistent with it. It's so hard to track and measure, except for our schools. Like that is where we see the most obvious. The hard part about schools, though, is that they go back into the same chaotic environments when they go home after school. So that's not shifting too. But our vision is to seriously study this. We would love if Dr. Amon's like, hey, do you guys want to borrow my fMRI machine and like study the imaging? Or even we found someone who can start testing cortisol levels and start measuring the cortisol before brain work and then after.
Oh,
we have 2 people who've done their pre-test and we just need them to do their second test. It's so hard to get a group of people to stay consistent.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's been one of the things, but that prison was like the perfect thing because they had nothing else to really do every day. And not to like laugh at their situation, but it was just truly like an audience that we could actually make happen.
Yeah.
And we got so close to getting them. And then and then right at the time the person was going to do it, they switched positions and then that fell apart. So there's always these moments, and we've had a vet program that we were trying to work with. It's just really hard to stay consistent with certain people.
Yeah. And it's also, what we need is to get to the level where we're actually in a research facility and people are, we have all the controls to see what's going on, to prove that they're actually doing it, et cetera. So if anybody listening to this needs something to study for your, neuroscience master's or PhD, please reach out to us. We are very open.
And Dr. Joe, he just did, I don't know if you've seen Dr. Joe Dispenza's The Source documentary.
Not yet.
It's so inspiring because he would take spit, blood, urine samples before they did their 7-day meditation. And it was the perfect control because they were there for 7 days. They were eating, sleeping, and doing everything on the same time frame.
Oh, no, I did see it. Okay, go on.
And then there's actual scientists at UC San Diego that were like, all right, I guess we'll look at this data. And they had it like in the back. They were totally disregarding it, not ready to look at it. And then they started looking at it and they're like, oh, whoa, what's going on here? And I was like, oh my gosh, the day that brain organization gets studied like that is the day that it all shifts. And I'm hopeful. I feel like it's coming.
Of course.
I mean, I would like to see the world where everybody has a better organized brain. I would be so hip for that. Yes. I'm like, let's get that dialed in globally. All of us 100%. Doing our brain work. Okay, Dani, you talked about this a few beats ago. But just also the like mental health work that you were also doing to complement the other stuff. So I am curious about that, like the mental, emotional health components of the program. I don't know what you can share about it, but just obviously how all that does connect and how those things should be integrated, I guess, to have an optimal outcome. But anything you can share on that front without giving too much away of like secret sauce.
Yeah, well, we actually love to share all of our stuff because we always think like if there's more people that can benefit from it, then the world's just a better place. The problem is like I don't know if you experience this, Allison, but in the beginning, when you start doing the brain work, it stirs stuff up. And so sometimes it can bring out, we always give the analogy, it's like organizing a closet, like your brain is the closet. So as you do these movements, it starts to kick out all the things that you don't need. Like that's all donation stuff kind of vibe. And in that process, it's a little alarming. So that's why that's the only thing we get nervous about is when people start the work and they start to stir stuff up and then they're like, oh no. And that's where we say, that's where you need us to like let you know what's happening. Other than that, we love to share this stuff. But for the mental, emotional stuff, what we're talking about is we call it, and this happens in level 2 of our program. So the first level, the first 6 modules is all about getting out of survival mode. That's doing the main movements that help to organize the brain, help you feel regulated. So you then can look at what programs are basically running your life. And by programs, we mean your subconscious beliefs. So in the first 7 years of life, you're really just in this theta state that's just downloading. You're a sponge. You're taking in your environment. You're hearing what your caregivers are giving you. You're hearing what school's telling you. Whatever environment you're in, you're just downloading it. And then that becomes the filter for how you see the world. Right. So we often give the example of like, and my dad was the classic money doesn't grow on trees kind of guy. Oh. And so much lack. And so I had a lot of lack growing up, right? I had a lot of fear about money and a lot of like, oh, it's so hard to make money. And these are programs that are thick inside of me. And so I'm still pulling apart that web. And for me, and so this is where the subconscious work comes in, and you can see it in your everyday life. So this is where we guide you in the second part of our program, level 2, where we really help you look at what filters are serving you, because you have a lot of great ones, and what filters are stopping you. And by filter, I mean belief system. Like, where do you think that like you're so limited in that thinking? Why do you not think you deserve the perfect X, Y, and Z life, right? And so this is where we really help you just to start with the basics. And we take you through the hierarchy of like Maslow's hierarchy of like the foundation of what all humans need. And then from there, we teach you how to create your own, what we call reconnects. And then we have our members doing reconnects all throughout the world at all parts of their day. And it's just as soon as you're activated or triggered by a situation, that's a sign that your nervous system is like, something's off here. You need to go deeper into like, what is really going on? Like, what fear is coming up for you that you need to shift so you can unlock that life that you really want to have. And it sounds really cheesy, but when you start doing this work, you start to see it and you're like, and the shifts are so subtle. And so some people are like, I don't know if it's just because I set my intention and I was more organized that day, or if because I did a reconnect. We're like, well, if it's working, just keep doing whatever, right?
Yeah.
So, and Paloma and I have been doing this now for years, and we are still shocked today to be like, I can't believe I don't have that belief that I love myself, or I can't believe I don't have that belief that I think I can do this. And so we always look at it as like, you're never done working on yourself. It's like eating healthy or exercising. You have to keep going. And it's exciting. So once you get into it, the degree in which it's, in the beginning, it seems daunting and it seems really, really hard. And most people are just like, I don't know how you do this. And then it's just like exercising. Like the marathoner can't run a marathon on day one. They have to train for it, right? And that's the same thing with your brain. So as soon as you start doing it more frequently, and we're asking you to do less than 20 minutes a day for the first, 12 weeks. And then from there, you get to create your own program. And I do literally 5 minutes of brain work a day. 5 minutes? Yeah. And I'm like, in 5 minutes, I can set the foundation, the tone for my day, and I can stay regulated as a mom. I can handle a million things hitting me at once, and I don't fluctuate. And I'm just like, chill. Before, one tiny stressor, person cutting me off on the road would have ruined my day.
Do you start your day with one of your, the 5-minute practice, basically?
I do. It depends on, like, for me and the kiddos, we do breakfast first. We try to get as much protein in the morning, and I try to get my natural sunlight, and then we do our brain work. Yeah. So that's kind of like my morning routine.
How does it, so people that like meditate in the morning, how does that, I'm sure you've gotten this question before, but like, where does that fit in? Like, is it better to meditate first and then do your brain work, or is it better to do the opposite Or it doesn't matter, just do it?
I honestly just do it. First of all, that's always what we say, because people will be worried about like the order that you're going to do the exercises in, for example. And it's like, do it whenever works, as long as you do it. Anything is better than zero. But in the specific example of meditation, I would do brain work, because I meditate twice a day, and I do brain work and then meditation. And that's always better, because at least you're more regulated by the time you get to the meditation, but you already release some of the stress. Do you know what I mean? Like you're already like kind of like you got your engine rolling by the time you get to the meditation.
This makes sense to me. Okay, and then how many like people's closets have you seen that match their brain?
Every single one.
100%.
Every single one. They try to fake it, but then we'll throw a question at them. That's why we ask you count by 6s or count by 8s, something that's not rote, or tell us what you ate for lunch, or say something, right? And you can't do both, because your cortex is trying to figure out the pattern. So your cortex can't do 2 jobs at once.
That's so wild. I was like, if you saw my closet, I'd be like, ooh, how many things did you tell me? I don't know.
Well, that's my main thing. Honestly, when I start to see my room become a mess, that's when I'm like, oh, girls got to do more brain work, you know? Because I'll walk in and I'm like, oh, that's disgusting. And so
we got to change
U-turn, go get your knee pads on. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that kind of segues us pretty well into this question that I ask everyone. What does wellness mean to you?
Wellness for me is balance. Because you need the expansion and the contraction, and you can't just always be well and good. You need to have those moments of up and down to see where you need to grow and shift and change. And balancing it, where I used to beat myself up so much if I fell off track or if I didn't eat something that wasn't organic. And now I've just learned how to just be a lot more chill about it, and realizing that like it's all in balance, girl.
Yes. I would say wellness is authenticity, because it means something different for each person, right? My authentic, well self can do more brain work or less brain work than yours, and can do more meditation or less or whatever. And I think it's so important in this age of over information to be able to trust your intuition and say, this is what I'm going to stick to, instead of trying, because I've been in the trap of like trying every single modality out there, and it's hard to whittle it down to what really works for you. But I think it's extremely important.
Yeah.
Okay. So we already talked a little bit about how you both start your day, but I want to talk a little bit more about that. So in the wellness spectrum of things, beyond the things that you've already talked about, are there any other like wellness non-negotiables, or things that if you don't do them on a daily basis, you don't feel as well as you probably could, kind of a thing? Anything like that beyond the, brain work, meditation for Paloma, anything like that?
Sleep.
Oh yeah, amen.
I think so many people just don't appreciate sleep. And I was totally one of them. I used to have such a bedtime procrastination ever since having kids too. I would be like, this is my time. And I would do that whole doom scrolling, and I'd be like, oh my gosh, I'm up till midnight. And I was like, I'm fine. And here's the thing. This is also what connects to brain work. You are so used to your own baseline. You're so used to who you are. You don't know what it feels like to be on the other side of it. Once you start to get on the other side of it and you actually see the contrast, you're like, oh my gosh, I was sleep deprived, or oh my gosh, I wasn't eating enough protein, or I wasn't doing X, Y, and Z to take care of myself. It's so drastic. And now for me, the clarity of sleep is an absolute must. I am like forcing myself to do a way better job of that. And that's where I create reconnects on it, where I'm like, you don't need to do any procrastination. Like, you is sleep. Like, get sleep. You're a better human when you've slept. So that's a big one for me.
I dig it.
Like that. I think for me, it's downtime.
Oh,
Like, I need to spend some time reading something, or spend some time doing a puzzle. I really like something manual. I feel like that really gives my brain a lot of rest. I like coloring. And I think that a lot of us get caught up in doing so much, and this is just being. You're just like chilling. You're coloring on a cute little puppy dog, And it really allows your brain to also just like let go of extra things. You put on some soothing little music, and it's the best feeling ever. I have to do that every day in some way.
Do you both ever download any of those like apps that say that they're like brain health apps or like brain game apps? Have you done any of those? No. Okay.
Not really, but I do love the New York Times games. I'm very much like a Sudoku, like puzzly person.
Yeah.
So I love like the Wordle and the spelling bee. I mean, Danny's laughing because every time I go to stay at her house, her dad is the cutest, and he will like print out the daily Sudoku and like word game from the paper. So yeah,
I love it. Okay, you both have your own podcasts. So I want to understand, how has your podcasting journey influenced kind of your approach to just how you educate people about brain health? Like, what is the connection between those two things?
I think the podcast for us was really huge because we are used to talking about this and people not always understanding and also not always being open to it. And so we noticed that podcasting was much more low key or low commitment, I would say, for somebody. So if you say, oh, that's cool, what do you do? Instead of sitting there with them and talking about it for 30 minutes and them feeling like pressured to like do something, you can just say, listen to my podcast, right? I think that's one thing. And the other thing, it's like, it's so much more approachable, I think, because people notice that we're not the people who are going to be standing on a pedestal saying, you need to do all these things for your brain, young lady. You have done it all wrong your whole life. Like, we are so open about all the struggles we go through like every day. And there are many, you know? And so I think people understand like, oh, it's not that serious. And life can be very serious and very unserious at the same time. And I think that's something we like to transmit, and people kind of like understand that, I think, through the way that we talk about it on the podcast.
I feel like you both do a fabulous job of this, honestly. I mean, I feel like the relatability, factor is like at a 10 plus, right? Like it feels very, I mean, the whole thing, even though it might be like a rough start just because it's something new and different, you make it very approachable, right? So I feel like you eliminate a lot of the fear just by virtue of how you both talk about it and how you make it, with the Instagram content, all of it. I applaud you for that.
Thank you. We have so much fun on the podcast, and I'm like, can we do another season already? And Paloma's like, but what are we going to talk about? I was like, I don't know, just talk about anything. Like, we love talking, so let's just keep talking. Yeah. And but we do, like, some people will ask us questions, and I think our next season's going to be about reconnects and really getting deep into like how that process of your subconscious is working, how it's showing up in your everyday life. So we're going to dive deeper into that. That's actually my hope and dream.
I feel like it'd also be cool for people to just, like maybe you submit kind of like a little poll to your community to just say, hey, who of you would want to just like have a talk about your brain with us? And like that could introduce a lot of just interesting, off the cuff content with, I mean, you don't know what people are going to say or ask or anything, but it could 100% lead to some interesting rabbit holes.
I love that. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Kind of interesting.
We should.
I don't know. Just throw it out there.
I love it.
Okay. We're going to do a quick fire. It's the first thing that comes to mind. So first thing that comes to mind, have fun. Early bird or night owl?
Early bird.
Night owl for me.
Okay. All right. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Coffee.
Okay. What kind of coffee?
Black.
Oh, I've been drinking Four Sigmatic coffee. I don't know if you've heard of that brand.
Coffee?
Or King coffee.
Okay. Very nice. Favorite color?
Green.
Blue.
What was the first paying job that you ever had?
Working at my dad's Subway.
Okay.
Or maybe a babysitter. Sorry.
Accenture. Mine was Accenture. I guess babysitter too. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Babysitter Accenture. I love it. That's awesome. All right. Favorite cuisine?
Mexican.
Italian.
And I'm Italian and she's Mexican.
I love it. Favorite band or singer or, performer?
I like Chappell Roan right now. I'm in that vibe.
It's okay. You both can have the same one. It's okay. I accept that. That's totally fine. That's actually adorable. It's adorable that
Okay.
you both have the same favorite. What is your favorite country that you've ever traveled to?
Iceland was pretty cool.
I love the UK.
Okay, UK. What's the one app on your phone that you can't live without?
Oh, right now, the human design app is pretty intriguing.
I have that. Yeah, it is pretty cool.
Wait,
Yeah.
we've been, me too. I would say either Kabbalah or human design.
I do wonder if there's any, like, it'd be interesting to, like, get someone's human design chart and then also, I mean, that really adds
Yes.
complexity to this whole thing. But, like, I just wonder also what connections exist in that, like, oh, you're this and your brain is showing me this. Here's what that is. I mean, that sounds like a whole other, like,
That's a lot.
PhD in brain health, like, if you can tackle that one. I'm here for
We
it.
do get into like the charts when we have one-on-one coaching clients, and it's so fun because it really reveals a lot. We're not that knowledgeable on it yet ourselves, but what we know, we're like, yeah, it's always helpful.
Yeah.
And we're
I'm
both
here for it.
projectors. What are you?
Yeah. No, what generator? I'm a generator.
Generator.
Okay, that actually,
that makes sense.
I'm a generator, and my daughter's a manifesting generator. Like,
my kids are those.
Ooh, both of your kids are manifesting generators. Yeah.
so interesting. Okay, what's the one word you would use to describe your business journey?
Perseverance.
Evolution.
Okay, good words. If you could have any entrepreneur as a mentor for a day, who would it be?
I just thought of like all the Shark Tank people. Mark Cuban? I don't know. No, would that be it? Oh, David Guillaume.
Okay,
Okay, so then I'm going to say Melissa Wood.
Okay, that's good.
very good. What is a book that has significantly influenced your mindset?
This one. The Metaphysical Anatomy book. Oh, it's so good.
Okay.
Yes.
Same?
I really like, what's it called? Creating Abundance by Deepak Chopra. Yeah.
That's a good one.
It's a good one.
Besides your own business, what is another favorite business?
To Be Magnetic.
To Be Magnetic.
Mm-hmm.
Love them.
If you could instantly acquire one new skill, what would it be?
I know how to speak every single language in the world.
Oh, dang.
Mine was fly.
That's a common one. Dan.
That's cute. You can fly.
Yeah.
You can fly with me on your back, and I'll just be like saying hello to everybody in every language.
Different languages. It's very complimentary. I like this. If you could time travel to any period in history, which era would you visit?
Like, I've just been reading a lot about the Roman Empire. I wouldn't want to live there, but I would. It's just on. That's the first thing.
She cannot stop talking about the Roman Empire.
Me and my son are thick in it. I wouldn't want to live in that time period, though. Oh, goodness. No.
No, but you would just time travel there. Like, you would visit.
Check it out.
You want to visit the Roman Empire? Okay.
It has to be the Roman times. I mean, they were very ahead of their times. And I'm like, what? I want to know about this. Like, I want to see what it looked like.
Okay.
I have like a weird fascination with Marie Antoinette. So I would go there and see what was going on over there. I don't know why I'm obsessed with her.
No, that's cool.
Funny.
All right. If you both weren't doing your work with In the Cortex, what else might you be doing?
I'd be very sad, but I'd probably be doing, if I didn't find my passion, it's definitely something in the sports and coaching world of like connection and people and that.
Cool.
I would be doing like comedy writing or like SNL kind of vibes for sure.
Okay, awesome. Okay. Looking to the future, because we've talked about a whole lot of things that could be happening in the future already, I think.
Yes.
But is there anything else, like any new programs, new initiatives, new things that you're really excited about, like that are tangible, or maybe not, maybe, but just the things that are on the list that you want to share that, you know, you're just really stoked to see happen?
We are going to be making a training program. We need more people doing this work with us. And so that's coming out. Every time we sit down and start working on it, we're like, ooh. So we're closer. 2025.
We're closer. But yeah, we want brain coaches all over the world, basically.
I mean, it seems like it'd be a good thing.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
We need to duplicate ourselves for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. What advice would you both give to an aspiring entrepreneur?
I just keep going. Like, you cannot stop. If something stops you and you think it's the end, like a viral post that people are mean to you about, take it as a test and just keep going.
Mm-hmm.
I would say not everything's so serious. Zoom out.
Mm-hmm.
Because it can feel like the end of the world and it isn't. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. I like that. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you were hoping I would? Or is there anything you wanted to talk about that we did not talk about?
Oh, man. I actually think this was probably one of the best podcasts in questions.
I agree.
We actually haven't had. I think that was your goal too.
Yes.
And I honestly,
Wait,
we have not had questions like this yet. So, and we've done a lot of interviews. So kudos.
I might be blushing. I might be blushing.
That's a good thing. Like, yeah, it's good.
Oh, no.
I mean, we could still keep talking for hours and hours, but
100%.
I feel like we could talk for hours and hours. Yeah.
Yes.
I feel confident. But yes, that I appreciate that wholeheartedly. Because as you know, when we had our first call together and you were like, oh no, we don't need to see the questions. I was like, oh crap, I'm going to need to bring this on. I was like channeling my Barbara Walters. And
yes, you did great.
Let me do this. I can do it. All right.
You did it.
It delights me that you say that. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I would like you both to share your socials. How can everyone find you? How can everyone embark on their brain work journey?
100%. So our Instagram is in the Cortex _US. Our TikTok is in_the_Cortex. Our website, inthecortex.com. You can always email us. It's just the two of us behind the scenes answering all the emails and all the things. It's hello@inthecortex.com. And if you use promo code Dean's List, we are going to give you $20 off the first payment of your program.
Amazing.
Come organize your brain with us. It's going to be awesome. And any question, genuinely, anybody who's listening to this who's like, I'm so confused about this, please reach out to us. Send us a DM, send us an email, anything. We are here to answer the questions.
They are I will say this, they are hyper responsive. And this is one of the ways that I think I fell in love with both of them so much more when I tried to redeem my creeping crawling assessment like 2.5 years later, and they were like, no problem. And I was like, oh my gosh, they're the best, right? Because I was so nervous. Like, they've moved on from that. And I was like bringing them back to, oh no, we don't really do that anymore. No, they were so gracious, so lovely. So yes, I think everyone should be doing this. Anything related to your brain. We need to exercise our brains just as much as we exercise our bods, because, if your brain is not functioning, then your bod probably isn't either, right?
Exactly.
And they kind of go together.
Hand in hand.
Dani and Paloma, thank you so much for being on the Dean's List. You're definitely on my perpetual Dean's List. Thank you for being on the Dean's List.
Thank you.
So fun.
And thank you all for tuning into this episode of the Dean's List. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite platform to stay updated, and follow us on Instagram at official_Dean's List and YouTube at It's Official Dean's List. I'm your host, Allison Dean. Until next time.